My name is Councillor Jamal Myers, the Chair of the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum. I'd like to call meeting 6 of the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. This meeting is being held using the city's WebEx technology, with members and staff connecting by video conference or calling in. We ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues. Members of the public can observe the meeting on YouTube. We are also providing captioning for this meeting. Tori will be our captioner today. I'd like to remind everyone to speak clearly today to assist the captioner in capturing all our comments. A few additional reminders. Staff, please remember to keep your video turned off until you need to speak or answer questions. This makes it easier for me as the chair and for those watching on YouTube to observe the meeting. Members and staff, please keep your microphones on mute unless you need to answer a question or speak. Members, if you wish to speak on an item, if you can, have your video on, and if you're able to, raise your hand or unmute your mic and let me know. I will create a speakers list. When voting, if you can, have your video on, and if you're able to, raise your hand or unmute your mic to indicate your vote. And if you have any motions on the agenda items, please submit them in writing to the clerk, and the clerk will ask both the program lead and the subject matter staff to review. The clerk staff are available by email at taac@toronto.ca, or you can send text messages to 416-317-8658. Although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Although the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act doesn't apply to Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee, I urge, out of an abundance of caution, for members to declare anything that could be perceived as a conflict of interest. Okay. Seeing none, may I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting held on February 5th, 2024? Moved by Howard Wax. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Let's consider the first item. I will give an overview of the chair's report. So Mental Health Week is May 6th to 10th. As we convene this meeting at the start of Mental Health Week, it's imperative that we recognize the intersectionality between mental health and accessibility. Mental well-being is a fundamental aspect of overall accessibility, and it's incumbent upon us as an advisory committee to ensure that our decisions and the work we do together reflect this reality. Let's use this week as an opportunity to amplify awareness, foster understanding, and continue to keep the mental health needs of all individuals, particularly those within our accessibility community, in mind as we move forward as a committee. Wheel-Trans community consultations. As chair of the TTC board, I was pleased with the attendance and participation in the Wheel-Trans community consultations hosted last month. The community consultations aim to further educate the public and gain feedback on our city's Wheel-Trans services. Over the past month, we've had the privilege of engaging with our residents, listening to their experiences, and gathering valuable feedback on how we can improve accessibility in our transit system. These consultations have been instrumental in shaping our understanding of the challenges faced by individuals who rely on Wheel-Trans services, and they've provided crucial insights that will help guide further decisions. National Accessibility Week, May 25th to June 1st. As we anticipate National Accessibility Week later this month, Let us approach it with a sense of purpose and optimism. National Accessibility Week provides a valuable opportunity to reflect on the strides we've made towards inclusivity and to renew our commitment to furthering accessibility efforts across our city. Through collaboration, sharing of lived experiences, and our work together as an advisory committee, let's leverage this occasion to elevate awareness. National Accessibility Week is a time to celebrate progress while looking ahead to the important work and progress to be made. We have one speaker on this item. I will ask the clerk to confirm that our first speaker, Miguel Avila Villard, is ready to proceed.
He's online.
Yes. Miguel is online, great. Welcome, Miguel. You have 5 minutes to speak. When you're getting close to the end of your time, I will let you know. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor Myers. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to talk on this advisory committee. I have been away for a while, but I'm back. With regards to National Accessibility Week, yes, we have worked to address some challenges in our communities. But there is still work to be done to address accessibility. I have to disclose that I have mental health and I have physical disabilities. I ride my tricycle around the city because A, it saves me on TTC tickets, talking about the Wheel-Trans consultations. I don't use Wheel-Trans, but I use my trike to get me around the city. A trike has 2 wheels. It allows me to drive safely and not be afraid to fall off my bicycle. I have fears that if I continue driving on 2-wheel bicycles, I may have accidents. I had 2 accidents in 2023, and I am afraid, as I'm aging, I'm 59, I'm afraid to have a hip replacement at this time. And I can't afford to be ill because I'm really considering, continue coming to City Hall until I have some, health and energy in my life. So on the last item, Mental Health Week, I think we need to strengthen our policies on accessibility. As I said, I have a tricycle. I live in Toronto Community Housing, and I have tried many ways to convince TTSC staff to allow me to park my trike on a safe space where I can leave my tricycle. It's been a month and a half that I don't have access to my tricycle. And I wonder if TCSC understands accessibility. I've been trying also to convey the need to have an e-bike and bike policy, which will address the trouble that we have in our communities. Many of us, as I said, save money not taking the TTC because we live on ODSP, we live on Ontario Works, we live on pension plans, which is not enough. So having other important obligations in life, like I have 3 kids on my own, I'm a single parent, so I would like to have accessibility to an important vehicle, which is my tricycle. Under normal circumstance, today I will be in person in front of you talking to you. But because I don't have access to my tricycle, I cannot afford TTC today, I'm speaking on hybrid mode. And it is my hope, Councilor Myers, that you can enhance the voice of disabled people like myself and many more that have the need to a safe transportation device. So it is my hope that you can enhance the voice of the people who are coming to this committee with living experiences. We are not here to create more aggravations to the system. We just want to help to develop better policies that addresses the needs of people with physical and mental health needs, which we have a long work to do, but at the same time, I acknowledge the good work of the Accessibility Committee, the City of Toronto, and also the TCAC has a accessibility committee that are doing great work to address many issues. I'm glad to say that I have a job that addresses my mental health. It's only a couple of hours a month, but yes, it's helpful to have a part-time job where they consider yourself as a contributor of society in spite of having a mental health condition and a physical disability. So thank you that I have this opportunity, but I would really appreciate to have access to my trike, because what happened is TCAC, they have put these notices where I used to park my e-bike, says, from now on, these e-bike lockers only. My God, this is not a policy. It's just a sign. So please, let's do the work that we can to enhance the voice of people with disabilities in the city of Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Members, do you have any questions for the speaker? No? Seeing none, thank you for addressing the committee today.
You're welcome.
I move that the item be received for motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. We will now move on to DI 6.2, Major Snow Event Response Plan. Members, today we have Vince Sferaza, Director, Operations and Maintenance, and Jennifer Neese, Manager, Strategic Policy and Initiatives, to provide a presentation on Major Snow Event Response Plan. Vince and Jennifer, I will turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Councilor Myers, and good afternoon to the committee members. I want to thank everybody for this opportunity to present to you today an update on our major snow event plan. Although, can you hear us? Because I think our computer just froze. It just froze. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Vince.
You can hear us? Okay,
Yes,
could you,
clearly.
okay, sorry about that. Yeah, our computer, we're actually in City Hall on the 22nd floor, but our computer just crashed. But if you can hear us, that's fine. So again, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity today to present to you an update on a major snow event response plan that the staff are preparing an event when the city should receive a significant amount of snowfall. And for significant amount, you're looking at something along the lines of 25 centimeters or excess of that. So I just want to once again thank you, and Jennifer and myself will be going back and forth giving the presentation today. So the first item on the presentation will be the decision history. And this is just, again, a bit of a background on what we are doing with respect to the plan. So in March of this year, I did present to the Infrastructure and Environment Committee an update of the events leading to a major snow event. And in that report, which was an information report, just get a bit of an overview of some of the work that we have been executing to prepare for a major snow event. Prior to that, actually, we went to City Council in March of 2022. And that was actually in response to a request from City Council. After, you may recall, in January, we had quite a significant snow event, over 50 centimeters. And once we finished with the clearing of the snow, we were asked to report back. We did in March of 2022. And we have been working since then on what we can do better in the event of a major snow event. And we also went to the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee in February of 2022. Again, right after that big major snowstorm. And the committee did have 5 recommendations, which you see up on the screen. And those 5 recommendations have been to some degree addressed, or we will be still working on some of them. So in our report in July, we'll have a better detailed response to each one of those 5 recommendations. But just very quickly, I can say that a few of those we have already accomplished. So for instance, recognize and quickly respond to urgent service requests made by people living with disabilities or seniors during the blackout period. And that's that hold period or actually clearing the snow. And in fact, that's something that we just introduced this year, that in the event that there is an emergency and there is a situation where people living with disabilities or seniors have to deal with emergency situation, we will in fact receive that service request for assistance during the whole period. Create a proactive accessibility service standard by incorporating intersectional gender equity lens, similar to Sweden's gender equal policy, plowing strategy. And that's something that we're actually introducing for our major snow event response plan. The third one was prohibit snow plows from storing snow and ice on sidewalks and bike lanes. And that's actually something that we've also do right now. Develop a public education campaign to inform property owners and residents of all of our services. And in fact, that's something that we have been doing quite aggressively over the last few years. And one of those public education campaigns was in fact a mail out. And some of you may have received this mailer to your home, which explains exactly all the services that we provide during winter. And just very quickly, that last item, report through the 23 budget process on funding required to ensure that the city can meet revised levels of service, including winter storms over 35 centimeters of snow. We will get into that more in the July report. Okay, so for this presentation, I'm going to give a bit of a background of what is a major winter event. Jennifer and myself will be talking about past engagement and key definitions. Number 3, a response plan update since January 2022. And number 4, our current work to improve further events. And last but not least, next steps. Okay, so again, with respect to background and major winter event. In January 2022, the city got about 55 centimeters of snow in 48 hours. That was the most snow that the city had had to experience in over probably 30, 40 years. That was one of those once in a generation snow events. And as part of cleaning up all that snow, which took approximately 30 days to remove all that snow, we actually collected approximately 179,000 tons of snow. Just to put that into perspective, that's just about the same amount of recyclables that the city collects on an annual basis. We in fact got that much snow in less than a day. And that's how much we actually collected from the city's infrastructure. As I said before, as part of that event, the city did request that we in fact develop a more comprehensive, a more modern major snowstorm response plan. And that's in fact what we're doing. The next item is past engagement and key definitions. I'm going to turn that over to Jennifer.
Good afternoon. The Accessibility Advisory Committee has heard from me before about engagement that we at Transportation Services undertook in 2023 to better understand the experience of people with disabilities on the streets and sidewalks of Toronto. And at the time, earlier last year, I was speaking more about construction zones, but I would like to remind you that out of the 6 categories of potential barriers in the city's right-of-way, people with disabilities responding to this survey identified snow clearing and winter maintenance as the second greatest area of concern. When asked to choose their top 3 out of 6 categories of concern, seasonal maintenance was chosen by 48%. And this survey was done in January of 2023 when there was a reasonable amount of snow. So it wasn't as if the survey was done later in the year when it may not have been top of mind. Drilling down deeper into barriers experienced due to seasonal maintenance issues, the greatest areas of concern were icy sidewalks and poorly cleared snow. And we're taking this feedback into account as we develop the major storm event response plan. Back to Vince.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a key definitions between, say, winter snow clearing and snow removal, because I think it's very key in understanding what it is that we, in fact, are going to be addressing in our July report. Our July report will be focusing on snow removal when there's a major snow event. So the first slide that we have there regarding key definitions is what are the difference between snow clearing and snow removal? And snow clearing is for a very typical event where you're using salt or salt brine and or doing some plowing so that the snow either melts or is pushed to the side. And that would be for your typical winter event. Just to put things into perspective and some context, we normally salt about 25 to 30 times a year, but we only plow about 4 to 6 times a year because the salting in and of itself is more than sufficient to deal with a typical winter event, something along the lines of 5 to 10 centimeters. Now, when you're talking about snow removal, that is where you're actually going through the activity of collecting the snow right from, say, a sidewalk, a bicycle lane, a road, picking it up and relocating it, actually moving it to an off-site street storage facility. And in the city of Toronto, we have 5 of these winter snow storage facilities. We refer to them as snow dumps, but in essence, what they are locations where we can safely store the snow that we've removed from the city's right-of-way. Okay, our next set of slides is, okay, so what about snow removal? Well, we actually do some minor snow removal when you get maybe 10, 15 centimeters, 20 centimeters of snow. And that's what we refer to as managed snow removal. And that's where snow removal is localized removal of snow where there is snow storage constraints. There isn't room to store the snow. And what that does, it creates access barriers for sightline issues or even other possibility mobility issues. So we actually know of locations across the city that when you get a minor snow event, that there isn't room to keep the snow there when you plow it over. And in those situations, we actually do remove the snow. Those locations are primarily bridge decks some bicycle lanes in the city, and some sidewalk areas where there just isn't room to store snow. Again, that is very isolated to very specific locations across the city. And it's what we refer to as a managed snow removal. So it's something that we could do when you get, like I said, 15, 20 seconds. Now, when you get a significant amount of snow, 30, 40, 50 centimeters of snow, then that is what we refer to as a major snow removal. And that's where removal is done citywide, across the city, right? All the snow accumulates exceeds any capacity, any storage capacity. There just isn't anywhere to store the snow when you have such significant snow accumulation. And that's what we're referring to for this report, major snow removal, when you get those big storms. The next slide that I just want to bring to your attention is, now when you get a major snowstorm, the city does actually have certain powers, certain tools that it could use to help with the operations. Two key powers are what we refer to as a major snowstorm condition. And that is a municipal bylaw where the city can declare a major snowstorm condition when 5 centimeters of snow has accumulated and substantially more snow is expected. As I said, it's a bylaw, it's chapter 950. And this is something that we did declare in January 2022. Again, only when you get those big massive storms. When you declare this major snowstorm condition, it helps the city with respect to its operations. Because what it does is it essentially says that the snow routes located across the city are now in effect, and it is illegal to park in specific snow routes areas. In fact, you may see some parking signs that has a P crossed out, and that is when you have a major snowstorm. And we've declared a major snowstorm condition. It's not something we do very often, but we did do that in January 2022. There's a provincial tool that we also use, and that's called a significant winter event. And we usually call this in concurrence with the major snowstorm condition. And it's declared when there is a significant weather hazard that is emerging, and that could pose a significant danger to road users. What this power actually allows us to do is it essentially suspends any of the provincial standards when it comes to winter clearing. The province does have standards for all municipalities to follow for a typical winter event, a 5, 10, 15 centimeter event. And the city actually has service levels for those type of events. But when you declare a significant weather event, it no longer obligates the city to adhere to those standards or those service levels, because it is just so much of a significant snowfall that it's no longer feasible to meet those services. Okay, so the next part of our presentation will be what we've actually been doing since January 2002, when we had that big storm. So we have introduced some new procedures. We have a lot more public communication. As I said, we have a very aggressive public education campaign to inform residents of what we're doing. But even before every winter event now, you will see us on television, hear us on the radio, on social media, a lot more communications prior to a winter event coming. And we do this even for a typical winter event, but for a major snow event, we actually are now prepared to communicate more earlier so that the residents of Toronto can understand exactly what it is that we plan to do and how they can prepare as well. I've indicated as well that 311 now has new protocols to assist residents, people with disabilities, when there is an emergency. And that service request will be accepted at any time. Doesn't matter when the winter snowfall started, we will now accept that service request. And we've also updated Plowtio, that is the public facing website, where you can go on and you can see how we're doing when it comes to winter operations. We've now updated to include not only roads, but bicycle lanes and sidewalks. We've also done a few other things. For instance, we've started looking at what other municipalities do across North America. So we've looked at, in fact, what best practices that we could take from other municipalities in North America. But actually, I should say, we've also included some Scandinavian countries as well. So Sweden is one of those countries that we, in fact, are looking at when it comes to a major snow event. As indicated now, we reinforced the prohibition of city snowplows to store any snow or ice on bicycle lanes or sidewalks. And I did mention the public education campaign as well. So the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Jen, and she's going to give us an assessment of the AODA requirements.
So an important part of our assessment, of course, is to understand our obligations under AODA regarding snow clearing. AODA requires that municipalities have multi-year accessibility plans that specify policies and procedures for maintenance of public infrastructure and spaces. Unfortunately, AODA does not have a specific requirement related to winter maintenance, but that doesn't mean that we don't believe that it's important to address. The City of Toronto's multi-year accessibility plan, which I believe you'll hear more about the update of that later today. The plan for 2020 to 2024 includes a commitment by Transportation Services to conduct a review of snow clearing policies, practices, and procedures using an accessibility and equity lens, equity analysis, and develop a strategy to reduce barriers that significantly limit the mobility of people with disabilities. One major change that has been made in the last couple of years regarding accessibility and snow clearing is the introduction of new standards for sidewalk clearing, that mechanical snow clearing is done on sidewalks throughout the city. And that clearing begins when the snow accumulation reaches only 2 centimeters. Finally, this accessibility and equity analysis is being incorporated into the work that we're doing right now to further update the major snow event response plan. It will both recognize and prioritize levels of service required to address the needs of people living with disabilities, with actions to focus on removing barriers rather than simply meeting provincial standards. And I would just go back to what Vince said earlier, that the major storm response plan is going beyond what we talk about in our levels of service with the snow clearing on the sidewalks beginning at 2 centimeters, and looking at how we're prioritizing the removal of snow when there are large snowbanks that accumulate because of a really heavy snowfall. And so the accessibility lens is being applied in that analysis to make sure that the areas that receive snow removal first reflect the needs and priorities of people with disabilities.
Great. So what are we still doing? So in fact, we're not done yet. We have a lot more work to do. As I said, we have made some changes, some improvements, but we recognize that there's still more work to be done. So one of the things that we're doing is we're drafting a vision. And we're drafting that vision, as Jennifer clearly said, based on an equity lens. And one of the things that we're now doing is also developing guiding principles. So up on the slide, you will see that in fact, we now have a draft vision when it comes to a big major snowfall. And that is to remove snow and prevent snow hazards so that to facilitate the safe travel of people on our public right-of-way infrastructure. Okay, so it is equally applied to make sure that everyone is safe so that not one particular infrastructure more or less is given priority over another, but we do have 6 guiding principles. And those 6 guiding principles are safety, access, mobility, the environment, efficiency, and communication. And over the next few slides, I will go into a little bit more detail for each one of those 6 principles. So the first principle, safety. Is to facilitate the removal of snow on the travel paths. Those travel paths being sidewalks, bicycle lanes, roads, multi-use trails, in an equitable manner that maintains the integrity of the infrastructure and minimizes emergency situations due to snow hazards. So we want to ensure that the integrity of the infrastructure is restored and that it minimizes situations due to snow hazards, so making it safe. Access. We want to ensure an equitable way or means to get to emergency and essential services for all users of the right of way. So we want to do our best to ensure that access to hospitals, access to other emergency services for all users of the right of way is equitable for those users. Mobility. We want to facilitate safe movement for all modes of transport in a way that supports equity deserving groups throughout the year. The next 3 are the environment, efficiency, and communication. Now, we definitely have to recognize that as we are removing the snow, as we're collecting all this snow from the right of way, that we do our best to mitigate the impacts to the environment while facilitating safe travel paths. You know, we have to preserve the snow covering on natural landscaping to allow the benefits of snow on permeable ground cover. So snow does have a benefit. It has a benefit for natural landscape areas. And that's something that we also have to recognize when we're removing the snow. But we must appreciate that there is in fact an environmental benefit that the snow provides, but also as we're collecting the snow, we minimize the impact of those operations. Efficiency, we try to achieve a productive operational process that mitigates costs and time. Snow removal is the most expensive and the most time-consuming activity when it comes to winter maintenance. It is extremely slow relative to, say, salting and or plowing. It's at least 3 to 4 times slower to do proper snow removal. It involves multiple pieces of equipment. And it also involves trucks that are filled with snow driving back and forth to our 5 city snow storage facilities. And you may recall that earlier I said we have 5 snow dumps. So you have trucks literally driving back and forth to the snow dump, back to collect more snow. It takes time and it is not inexpensive. It is a costly operation. And last, communication. We must effectively and accurately communicate with the public. So as city staff and our partner agencies, we must be clear about expectations and operational outcomes. It's my responsibility to ensure that the public, that everyone in the city of Toronto knows what we're doing, how we're doing it, when we're doing it, and why we're doing it. And hopefully that will help people in their expectations when it comes to snow removal. So those are the draft guiding principles. I'm now going to turn it over to Jen, and she's going to go through our action plan for the major snow event.
So I will emphasize that those are draft guiding principles, and we are undertaking a survey that you'll hear about in a moment to get feedback on that. And we're open to the committee's feedback today as well. We recognize that these principles will apply to all snow clearing and all winter maintenance operations, but how they are applied and the actions that come out of them may vary between a typical snow event and a major snow event. In terms of major event response plan, there are 5 aspects in the action plan. First is base planning. And this is something that we would do in advance of the snow season, pre-planning that takes place before the season that considers factors that are constant and known. For example, the locations of hospitals, the locations of sidewalks that don't have a lot of snow storage capacity. Action planning is the second step, and that takes place once a storm is approaching or underway, when we know more about the nature of the storm, the period of time over which the snow might fall, the direction that it's traveling from, and for example, whether it's light and fluffy snow or heavy snow. And there's a lot of nuance involved in action planning for a particular storm based on all those characteristics. Then we would execute on the plan, implementation, phase 3. We will document and track how the snow removal is undertaken and the impact, how quickly it can be done and the impact on the city, and how effectively we're returning the infrastructure to a clear state for safe travel for all. And we'll develop a database of outcomes that can be compared to the base plan and to the action planning, to cycle back in continuous improvement so that we're always tweaking the plan or updating to make sure that we're doing better next time. And that's the 5th part, is the postmortem, observing the results and outcomes, reviewing against the original plan, and identifying areas for improvement in future. In terms of interpreting the guiding principles that Vince outlined into priorities for the major snow event response plan, we've identified 4 key areas of priority. 1, to provide access and safe movement on sidewalks, including for people living with disabilities, supporting transit use and gender equity needs. 2, removing snowbanks in key areas such as streetcar stops, bus stops, and school bus loading zones.
Hi, Jennifer.
3, ensuring all bike lanes are safe and passable, including the expanding number of kilometers of physically separated bike lanes.
Jennifer?
And finally, prioritize snow removal on narrow roads with limited snow storage capacity, recognizing that larger roads have more capacity for storage than narrow ones. We know
Hi,
that major
Jennifer?
snow events.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you, Counselor.
Sorry, I'm just conscious of time, and we have 5 other presentations to go. I'm just wondering if we could, because I want to make sure there's time for questions for this presentation, because I'm sure there will be. Would it be possible to wrap this up in 5 minutes or so?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
So why don't we just wrap it up on the last two? So as Jennifer said, we are developing a plan based on specific priorities. And how do we want to hear from everybody? 1, we have started with the survey. So survey has been initiated, and it's consulting with select communities, including people with disabilities and people who cycle. So you may see that survey. I think did it go out last week, or is it going out? Yeah, it did go out, it went out last week. So we certainly appreciate your feedback. We ask them specific questions with respect to needs and concerns as it relates to a major snow event. We are engaging with other agencies. So we are engaging with first responders, Toronto Fire, Toronto Police, paramedics, the TTC, the school boards, and other city divisions. So we are in fact making this a very, as complementary as we can, an inclusive plan. In terms of next steps, as I indicated, the survey is now open. We started discussions. We're going to report back to Infrastructure and Environment Committee in July, and then to City Council. And following that, I'm sure we'll get some further insight and direction from City Council, and we will be refining the criteria and preparing a specific action plan for the 24 and 25 season. So we can certainly leave it up for questions now, Councillor. So thank you everybody for your patience. We know we went a little bit over time. Sorry, we were just able with technical difficulties on our end, but nevertheless, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you both. Thank you both very much. Are there any questions of staff on this item? No?
Myers, this is Navi.
Navi, yes. Navi, 5 minutes, please.
Hi, Vince and Jennifer, thank you very much for your presentation. I'm wondering if you can tell me about the tracking and documentation portion of the improvement plan and a little bit more details about whether user experience or people with disabilities and their feedback following a major weather event is being envisioned as a portion of that improvement cycle and what that would potentially look like. Thanks.
Certainly. We're still in development. So we would certainly love to hear your feedback during as part of this survey. If that's something that you believe would be essential, but also helpful for us. So after a major event, or even during an event, as Jennifer said, we will have a tracking and documentation procedures put in place to ensure that we know where we're going and how we're doing. But after each event, there will be an opportunity to do a postmortem. And I believe that's, if I heard you correctly, there might be an opportunity there again to receive some feedback. So that's something that we'll certainly consider. As I said, we're currently tracking, developing that plan, but something that I would strongly suggest as part of the survey. There will be a section there for other comments. More than happy to receive that if you have any specific recommendations or suggestions that you can offer us.
One part of the tracking will certainly involve looking at any comments or complaints and concerns that have been expressed through 311. That is one of our best channels of receiving communication or concerns from the broad public. It's to be determined what further engagement there would be specifically with the accessibility community.
Back in 2022, we did go back in February to TAC, but yeah, we'll see if there's anything beyond the one that we can do. Absolutely. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Are those all your questions, Navi?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, first we have Howard and then we have Luke. Howard, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you for your presentation. I'd like to find out whether we'll get an update on your report for our July meeting.
So we are presenting to the Infrastructure Environment Committee on July the 3rd. And then we are going to City Council on, I believe that was July, just checking the dates here. Just bear with me, July 24th. So I don't know if we're going to have an opportunity to report back to this committee in July, but we're more than happy to report back after we certainly go to council in July. But we just have to check the schedules. We just have to see if in fact we're able to make all the clerk deadlines and so forth.
Thank you.
But we certainly have no problem coming back to this committee at some point, absolutely.
Thank you. Any further questions, Howard?
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Luke. Luke, 5 minutes, please.
All right. Thanks, Jennifer, Vince. Just a quick question about how these plans translate to the contractors who are actually moving the snow, and yeah, those operators who may be city employees. So how the organizations perhaps are aware of these plans, whether there's any contractual agreements that are made or stipulated in those contracts. And the actual operators. I know during our last connect, we talked about the importance of how training those people who are actually operating the equipment be made aware of the lived experiences of people with disabilities. And yeah, I live just behind City Hall, and there's a curb cut that exists between the pathway that connects Elizabeth Street and Chestnut, and there was snow piled up over top of that curb cut. So that just communicates this real need to make sure that everyone connected to this big city issue and investment is tuned in to how impactful it can be for people, for all of us, including people with disabilities. So just a question about that type of follow through and transfer of this plan to those actually doing the work.
Thank you for that, Luke. There's a few questions in there. So the first one with respect to the contractors, the contractors are required to essentially follow our instructions when it comes to removal. So we will be preparing plans and procedures. That's one of the outcomes of this exercise, is that we will be preparing plans and procedures so the contractor knows exactly where snow removal is to occur, how, and when. So the contracts that we have with our winter maintenance service providers, when it comes to a major snow event, a 30, 40, 50 centimeter snow event, they are obliged to essentially follow our instruction. So that puts the control with the city, and that's where I think we want it. We want the contractor to essentially execute the service based on what we're about to produce through this exercise. Having said that, we also are building up resources within our own in-house city staff. And that includes both equipment and staff. So snow removal following a major event will be executed by both the contractors and city forces. And those two parties will be given clear instruction on where they will be removing the snow. The one thing that we found during the January 2022 event was the ability of our in-house staff to be more flexible, to pivot more quickly. And that's where we believe our city staff will be more effective. So they will be given specific locations based on the priorities, based on the plan. But having said that, in the event that there is a major issue that perhaps we did not account for, or as Jennifer said, we have a base plan, but then that base plan has to factor in the snowfall itself. We'll be able to move the in-house staff to deal with that issue. So you raised one particular issue behind City Hall, Elizabeth Street. And if that was an area that perhaps wasn't given the most significant priority, maybe it was an area that was to receive snow removal at a certain date. However, if the situation should arise that it becomes more a priority, we would be able to reassign our in-house staff to deal with those issues. So we are looking at how we can also supplement the contractors with our in-house staff, and how our in-house staff can be more flexible and nimble to deal with issues. But under both situations, we will be preparing the plans, we will be developing the procedures, and the contractor, in-house staff will be executing the work that will be coming out of this exercise. So hopefully I was able to answer that question.
Thank you. That was your last question, Luke. Does anybody else have any questions? Luke, do you want to go for a second round of questions? I can't tell if your hand is up, sorry.
A little bit. It was, yeah, just a little bit of clarity on that
Sure,
that
just want to
response,
confirm
Vince.
first that there's nobody with another, no other questions? No? Okay, Luke, go ahead.
Vince, will those procedures be available for review?
Well, we will be presenting procedures and general guidelines to city council. So there will be, yes, there will be, as part of the outcome, a list of priorities and procedures that we'll be presenting to city council. I don't know exactly to what detail that will be at this point yet. We're still developing those, but there will be an opportunity to see them when we present to city council. I don't know exactly yet to what detail, Luke. I'm sorry, I can't answer your question directly, but we are certainly looking at providing some information to the general public, absolutely. So that the general public has knows what their expectations and know what the outcomes are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Are there no more further questions of staff? Are there any speakers on this item? Just as a reminder, this is when motions can be moved. Nope, seeing no further speakers, can I please have a motion to receive the item for information? Thank you, Dana. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much, Vince and Jennifer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next today, we have Alice Zhu, Director General Digital City, Ryan Biava, Manager ConnectTO, Melissa Kim, Management Consultant, ConnectTO, and Anita Diol, Management Consultant, ConnectTO, to provide a presentation on the development of Toronto's expanded free public Wi-Fi strategy. And this is item DI 6.3, Toronto's Wi-Fi strategy. I will turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alice, and I work in the city's Technology Services Division. For your information, I am an Asian woman in my early 40s. I just had a birthday, so I can no longer say pretend I'm in my 30s. But it's our pleasure to be here today and to have an opportunity to speak with you. Jennifer, do I drive the slides? Yes?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So I will be sharing my screen and give a presentation that you have in the agenda. And the purpose of us coming to you today primarily is to give you an update on the work that's been done so far, and specifically to seek your feedback in two ways, and in addition to any other ways that you would like to give us information. One is if you have any feedback on this, the strategy itself, and then the second question is, is there anyone else that we should be connecting with as this presentation is shown to you? So if you don't mind keeping that in mind as we go through the presentation, I'd be most grateful. Okay, so the agenda is quite straightforward. 3 topics: current state of the public Wi-Fi, what's happening in Toronto from that perspective, our consultation approach, as well as the proposed strategy, and leaving time for discussion. I'd like to first introduce you to, digital divide in the city of Toronto. Even though the city has some of the fastest infrastructure for internet in Canada, there continues to be a digital divide in our city. One of our program's focus is to expand access to Wi-Fi, so that we can address this digital divide, which is experienced most predominantly by the most vulnerable people across our city. In a city as prosperous and as connected as ours, no one should be left behind in the digital divide. And we understand from research that most people in the city who are left offline are or experience a digital divide is due to either the quality of the internet or the pricing or a combination of both. We have some of this research available on our webpage as well if you're interested. So what are we here to talk about today? It's this wedge of the pie chart here. Overall, digital equity can address different types of components, including access to devices, digital literacy, and internet access. Today, we're here to talk about internet access specifically, and even more precisely, we're here to talk about free public Wi-Fi strategy as one of the ways to improve internet access. So, you know, we do have ongoing work in the other areas as well, but the focus in today's discussion is thinking about how the city can leverage its city-owned assets to improve connectivity. You know, we're not, just for clarity, this is not to say, you know, the city bringing free Wi-Fi into everyone's homes. We are specifically talking about free public Wi-Fi in public spaces. So what's been done so far is since the start of the program, we're happy to say that we have now installed and have up and running free public Wi-Fi in over 110 locations in the city. They're mostly in community and recreation centers, as well as other areas like common areas in community housing and places like St. Lawrence Market and St. Lawrence Hall. These locations are added to the existing free public Wi-Fi locations in every single Toronto Public Library, and they've been a real you know, a resource and teacher to us in this area, where they've been providing, you know, public access to people for many more years and continue to do an excellent job at it. We have a map on the city's website, which you can find at toronto.ca/Wi-Fi, and it gives you a map of all the locations, Toronto Public Library, Toronto, the Connectio locations, etc., and gives you some insight into how to get there. And so onto the proposed approach to the public Wi-Fi strategy. We started with the report and design phase last year. We're now at the consult and consolidate phase, which includes one-on-one meetings with key partners, includes a community consultation approach, as well as in-person online consultations. And the next step will be publishing and implementing all the learnings and advice that we're hearing from everyone to create that strategy and to implement that strategy with a report back to council in Q2 2025, which was the request from City Council. I wanted to give you a brief overview of our community-led discussions. We are lucky to work with the city's Social Development Finance Administration Community Development Unit to leverage the existing relationships with 14 community groups, where we'll be providing them with a discussion guide where the conversation will be conducted to talk about what barriers or challenges the members face in accessing the internet, as well as what actions can the city do better to support those who are experiencing the digital divide through access to free public Wi-Fi. The public consultations overall comes in both online and in person, like I mentioned. The online versions, the virtual sessions are, one is in evening, one's in the afternoon, and the in-persons also afternoon and evening, spanning the city in the east and west, north and east ends. And we're hoping to complete those sessions by mid-June, so June 18th. I'll give you a brief overview of the 4 strategies that we have the 4 pillars that we have in our strategy, which are universal public access, digital equity, user experience, which I know it's already been touched on from the previous presentation, as well as innovation and culture. So very briefly, to give you a little bit of insight to what we're talking about, for universal public access, we're talking about, providing all residents and visitors free public Wi-Fi in public spaces. Proposed actions could be, expanding public Wi-Fi in outdoor parks, which is not something that's we have a lot of. We have only one park with public Wi-Fi. Thinking about putting in Wi-Fi as an essential design component when developing new and redeveloping areas. The city is very good at building public spaces physically, but it's time to think about how do we build digital spaces as well, or enable digital components in those spaces. On the topic of digital equity, it's all about bridging that digital divide, like we talked about. So how do we bring Wi-Fi to those who need it the most? So taking a barrier, limiting the barrier approach to an equity approach to this work. So some actions could be expanding the Toronto Public Library's Community Librarian Program, which is an excellent program that right now has just a couple of community librarians that can go into locations to help folks learn how to use the internet and, be safe as well. I'm thinking about how do we offer this access when people are needing it the most. For example, thinking about our cooling centers and heating centers in the winter, with the weather getting nicer, and now it's coming to top of mind when people are needing these services. How do we make sure that they have access to connectivity as well? User experience. Being in technology services, this is something we think about day to day as well. And so how do we make sure that this is something that's easily understandable and can easily be communicated? So the items on this page are specific to the public Wi-Fi program. So how do we make sure our documents are clear, they're accessible, and how do we maintain a way for people to give us feedback on an ongoing basis so that we can continue to improve that user experience. And lastly, on innovation and culture, so how, technology can often be a source of creativity and innovation as well. So what are some things we can do here? So including thinking about enabling more digital art through our city programs, showcasing technology, and some of the actions would be, for example, partnering with a BIA to make those things happen. Okay, so I promise I'm almost done, just 2 more slides. So on the discussion side, as I mentioned at the beginning, so based on the presentation this afternoon, are there any immediate concerns or gaps that you can think of on how we're thinking about free public Wi-Fi? In addition to those community-led discussions, are there any other avenues, groups that we should be consulting with, especially keeping in mind consultation with people with disabilities? And then lastly is just, what unique challenges, thinking about it from an intersectional barrier perspective, this community experience with the digital divide and access to technology overall. I would love to hear from you on that as well. The last slide is something that is just for your information. Our engagement website is up now, so it's toronto.ca/Wi-Fi strategy. And so there's a survey that's live. And in addition to the conversation we're about to have, if there's anyone you think would be willing to give us feedback, we'd be most grateful if they could fill the survey and let us know their thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Alice. So we have one speaker on this item. I will ask the clerk to confirm that our first speaker, Miguel Avila Valerda, is ready to proceed. There you are. Welcome, Miguel. You have 5 minutes to speak. When you're getting close to the end of your time, I will let you know. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Myers and everybody else. I'm gonna give my perspective as a TCAC tenant. I live in Toronto housing where the population is mostly people with disabilities. I appreciate the work of this initiative to enhance the service delivery and some community rooms in housing. Looking at the map, I'm having a difficulty accessing the number of TCSE buildings that this service is being provided for free Wi-Fi accessibility. Perhaps as you're taking notes for improvement, that will help me to understand how many public access we have in Regent Park, for instance. That's where I live. This is the hood. And many of the new buildings are being, not equipped with the free Wi-Fi yet. However, in phases 4 and 5, we're going to have a brand new library, which will means that down the road, we will have a future connection to this hub of technology to get access to like Bell 5. I live in an old building, so setting up the infrastructure is quite a challenge because you have to drill a lot of walls. And because it's a big building, some of our walls are really thick. We have a gym in 220 Oak Street, where I live, and COTA Inspires is an agency that supports people with mental health and disabilities, provide us with free Wi-Fi. However, the technology is very old and it will require an investment. Luckily, TCAC is investing capital funds in the tower renewal of 220 Oak. Perhaps as the shareholder of Toronto Community House in the city has an obligation to perhaps, hey, don't forget the residents of 220 Oak. They do require free Wi-Fi because, as I said, many of us rely on ODSP, Ontario Works, pension money that does not go too far. You know, groceries prices keep going up and up and up. So for us, if we can have free access to Wi-Fi will be a bonus for us, especially for young people that are taking college courses, that, getting a retraining, trying to move on, getting out of poverty. So having free access is not a privilege, but it is a tool that will help many of us who live in poverty for a long time to escape and have better jobs and be connected to the world. I prefer to come in person, by the way. Coming to these meetings, it gives me more excitement to talk to my counselors and addressing important issues. But anyway, I'm glad that the city is working on this project. Kudos, congratulations, and keep up the work so that one day will be a free Wi-Fi public access in the city. Thank you.
Thank you for your remarks. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? So Eric, 5 minutes, please.
Perfect, thank you. I just want to say, as someone working in the digital accessibility space, this is a very exciting initiative, so I'm very glad to hear it, and you guys are doing some great work. I was just curious if there's been any thoughts so far, or as part of the consultation around third-party or corporate support to help roll this out. I imagine with most city initiatives, budgets are a constraint.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Sorry, just to confirm, that question was not for the speaker, that was for the staff.
I'm sorry, that was for staff, yes.
Okay. So Miguel, you're off the hook. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Miguel? No? Okay, great. I'll leave it to staff now. Thank you.
To the speaker, my apologies, I jumped in as well. Thank you, Miguel, for your words. So Eric, we are always interested in partnering with everyone who's interested in partnering with us. One example I'd like to share with you is during COVID, we were able to get a donation, quite a sizable donation from Cisco Canada, over $1 million in equipment and in services to bring free public Wi-Fi into, in the end, it was about 22 tower neighborhood buildings here in the city. And it was a project of the first of its kind, where we put in access points on top of these buildings that are not city owned, and we're able to bring blanket free public Wi-Fi for folks in those buildings. So a researcher did research on this from U of T and found that the buildings with free public Wi-Fi in the period of research had a 14.4% lower COVID rates than the baseline. So that's to say, of course, we're open to partnerships. Of course, budget is always an issue. That's why it's so important to hear from communities like yourselves to know, so that we can put the most use to each dollar, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, Eric?
No, thank you.
Okay. Kate, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for that presentation. I have a question, and I'm not sure if you're the right person to answer it, but in one of your earlier slides, you talked about the Wi-Fi being just one part of the strategy for digital equity. Do you know when access to devices and digital literacy, are those happening in parallel, or are they going to happen before, after? How is that all going to come together to make a comprehensive strategy?
So thanks for the question, Kate. And through the speaker, we're definitely looking at this in parallel, but also where we are able to get resources. I'm not trying to skirt around the issue. I'm being fairly honest about the situation. And so in terms of access to devices, we do have ongoing work about that. Again, when there is an ability for a donation, for example, again, during the pandemic, we were able to get 500 free smartphones from TELUS, and we were able to work with Toronto Aboriginal Support Services Council to get those phones to those who need it for free for over 2 years. But those opportunities are few and far between, so we do rely on donations quite a bit in that area. In terms of digital literacy, we do also work with Toronto Public Library, as well as our internal resources. And we are trying to do this in different ways. One of the things that we were able to do, again, as a program which we want to expand, is we were able to work with the CE Excellence, Center for Black Excellence, to train young people who are in the buildings that are getting free public Wi-Fi, so they can actually bring their network skills, network like as in computer, not like networking, but also there are soft skills like interview skills, etc. And we were able to have a couple of those youth, go through the program and find jobs in tech by the end of it. So that's the kind of thing we want to do more of and enable more of. But again, it's a big budget cost, and we want to, we want to take those opportunities when they're available.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Miranda, 5 minutes, please.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I think it's a great initiative. I'm just wondering also if you can speak to cybersecurity and how to safeguard in regards to this topic.
Oh, absolutely, Miranda. Thank you for the question. And through the speaker, we take individual security and privacy very, very seriously. And that's one thing I think that's different for public Wi-Fi that you get from the city versus, let's say, public Wi-Fi you get from a coffee shop or, let's say, a shopping center. So in both the privacy and security side, we have high standards to meet, and we're never going to compromise on that. But part of that digital literacy I was talking about earlier is also people need to learn more about public Wi-Fi. Nothing is ever 100% secure, unfortunately, these days. And more digitization happens. We're each of us more and more at risk, especially, and this is something that exasperates existing vulnerabilities, if you know what I mean. So definitely we're looking into that in other areas of our program work overall. But to give you sort of a summary, there are cybersecurity protocols in the way that we provide free public Wi-Fi, but nothing is ever completely secure. So each individual, we also need to take steps as well. But on the privacy side, which is also often goes hand in hand, this is something where we do not collect your personal information. We don't sell you personal information, right? We're not, one of those like it's free now, but you pay later kind of thing. So this is the kind of situation we're trying to avoid, so that we can offer more of a level playing field for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Any other questions, please? No? Do we have any speakers on this item? Hearing no further speakers, therefore, can I have a motion, please, to receive the item for information? Kate. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you very much. Next, we have item DI 6.4, 2025 to 2029 Multi-Year Accessibility Plan. Members, today we have Deidre Boyle, Manager Accessibility Unit, and Karen Mills, Accessibility Consultant, Accessibility Unit, People and Equity Division, to provide a presentation on the 2025 to 2029 Multi-Year Accessibility Plan. Deidre, Karen, I will turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you. I think Karen's gonna.
I'm actually having an issue sharing my screen at the moment.
Okay.
I don't think I've been given the permissions.
See if I can. I cannot either. Maybe clerks can give
Karen,
Karen
now you are
permission.
the presenter, Karen.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having us on the agenda today. We're very happy to be here, and we always appreciate hearing your advice that you provide, and we thank you for the important work that you do for the city. The Accessibility Unit hasn't had the chance to formally meet many of you, so we've put together this presentation to introduce you to us and the work that we do to support the organization. We will provide a brief overview of the city's accessibility framework, and specifically, we want to share with you some of the work we're doing around the review of the city's multi-year accessibility plan, which is under review this year. Next slide. So this is our team. On the slide, there's pictures of us, and the Accessibility Unit is part of the Equity and Human Rights section of the People and Equity Division. Our director is Debbie Burke-Ben, and I am Deirdre Boyle. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm the manager of the Accessibility Unit. And I work with two lovely humans, Karen Mills, a consultant who will be co-presenting with me today, and Nick Rossi, who has recently joined our team to our benefit. Next slide. This slide depicts the city's organizational chart with the city council and city manager, and we just wanted to share it so you can get a scope of our work. As I said, we are situated within the People and Equity Division, which reports directly to the city manager's office, and there's about 42 divisions. So we provide corporate level advice and support to all divisions across the city. It's worth noting that the scope of our work is limited to the Toronto Public Service. So we don't have oversight for agencies, boards and committees. So the Toronto Police Service, for example, or Toronto Community Housing, or the library, or TTC, they have their own accessibility policies and strategic plans. So although we communicate with them and maybe partner on certain projects and consult with each other, we have no responsibility for those plans, which is why our strategic plan is just limited to Toronto Public Service. Next slide, please. So our mandate, so overall, it's the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which is the basis of the work we do on behalf of the city. The work included on this slide can be considered our lights on work. This is what we have to do at a minimum. So under the legislation, we're responsible for developing and maintaining the corporate accessibility policy, the multi-year accessibility plan. We coordinate corporate reporting processes. We publish annual reports on the progress. We file AODA compliance reports with the province. We respond to provincial accessibility audits. And in addition, we provide strategic advice and expertise to advance disability inclusion and accessibility by design. We also support the work of the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee by providing information around our strategic plan and the requirements under AODA. We develop guides and resources, and we manage public inquiries. We had up to 300 last year of people contacting our office for support. On this slide, you'll see there's 3 bubbles, and those are the different buckets of work or how we see our work. Monitoring compliance with AODA, advancing disability inclusion and culture, and providing strategic advice and expertise. And we put it there because these are how we see it, but they're all very interconnected and interdependent in our day-to-day work. Next slide is, okay. So this slide is to give you a general lay of the land. It is a visual depiction of the current accessibility framework. And you may be familiar with this, but I think it's helpful to review, especially the importance of the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee in the accessibility framework at the city. At the top, we have the commitment of City Council, the commitment to building an accessible city. And this guides our work overall. And then we have under that the corporate accessibility policy, which was last updated and approved by council in 2021. And the policy really aligns our compliance requirements set out in the AODA. Below that, we have our multi-year accessibility plan, which is our 5-year strategy that was last adopted in 2019. It goes above minimum compliance to remove, identify, and prevent disability-related barriers in city programs and services and spaces. And finally, we have city standards and guidelines, which further support accessibility in city businesses. Now, many of these are not things that are the responsibility of the accessibility unit. We can't be responsible for everything accessibility related at the city, but these do contribute to the framework and they intersect with our work. And the committee, TAC, has a lot of, this is where you often give advice on these different pieces, as you have today heard from transportation and technology. So some of these, just as an example, under customer service, each division has customer service standards, which include accessibility requirements in information and communications. We have the technology services has developed a digital accessibility standard. We have accommodation policies and guidelines under employment and so on. We have complete street guidelines. We have taxi bylaws. And then under public spaces, we have accessibility design guidelines. So all of these things are not the responsibility of the accessibility unit, but are things that TAC often provides great advice on and things that contribute to the overall framework. And of course, yeah, this is, you can go to the next slide, Karen. So what is the multi-year accessibility plan? It is the 5-year strategy for the identification, removal, and prevention of accessibility barriers. The goal of the plan is to improve awareness and understanding of legislated requirements and embed accessibility best practices into all city operations beyond minimum compliance. We, the accessibility unit, prepare annual reports on the progress made, and they're posted on our website. These reports do hold us accountable to the public. If you are familiar with the plan, the current plan, you know that there's over 60 initiatives, and I'm happy to report that in our last year of the current plan, we have met most of the commitments. There's one that's outstanding, some that are still in progress, but I think that's a very good place that we're at in terms of meeting those goals. And as the title suggests, the current plan runs to the end of 2024. So we are now full on into the process of updating and renewing our plan. And so we are here really today to talk to you today about that process. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Karen to share some information about that.
Thanks, Deirdre, and good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to be here in front of you finally for the first time. My name's Karen Mills. I'm one of the accessibility consultants, and my pronouns are she and her. So as Deirdre mentioned, we've started reviewing and redeveloping the current multi-year accessibility plan. So I'll take us into what our approach looks like for this work, as well as what we've done previously and what we still have ahead of us. So this slide really just highlights and breaks down our approach to the process. So overall, we've broken our review and redevelopment process into 3 main phases of work, which are organize, develop, and launch. And then under each of those phases, we have identified separate kind of unique stages of work under each phase. So under the organization phase, we have stages for prepare and imagine or reimagine. Under the development phase, we have listen and plan. And then under the launch phase, we have execute and monitor. So this slide, it really shows the overall timelines for the development of the new strategic plan. We started the initial preparation work in the fall of last year. So that really included some background research on what other accessibility plans look like. So we looked at federal plans, which are now a requirement, as well as other municipal plans, the provincial plan, obviously. And we also reviewed various disability-related data that's available to us. So that's data coming from the National Survey on, for People with Disabilities, our Human Rights Office. They collect data each year and publish a yearly report on complaints and inquiries coming into their office. As well, we have some internal data from staff through our employee engagement surveys. And there's some additional surveys too, such as the transportation data that we saw this morning or earlier this afternoon, that, looking at barriers on our city sidewalks, streets, construction sites, things like that. So all that we kind of started to look at to formulate, what the new plan is going to look like, what areas we want to really focus in on. So over the winter, we really moved into this imagine or reimagine phase. And really through that, what we've decided we want to do is really reframe the plan as being a disability inclusion action plan. So you may see the title change, sort of move on from the multi-year accessibility plan to something like disability inclusion action plan. And really our overall intent with that is to raise the status of the plan within the city and to really make it clear to city staff that it is a plan about people with disabilities, and it's not just about compliance or access, it's about equity and disability inclusion as a whole. So it's a little bit of reframing. So then kind of after we went through that reimagine and refocus phase, we entered the listen phase. So this is kind of where we are right now. Obviously, the listen stage is our consultation stage. Many of you already know we launched a public consultation survey seeking feedback from people with disabilities, support persons, and community organizations. Oh, my cat, sorry. Seeking feedback from community organizations during the month of April. The purpose of that survey was really to dive deep into what disability-related barriers people are facing across the city, and in particular with accessing city programs, services, information, public spaces, as well as employment opportunities. And through that survey, we're hoping to kind of distill all the information down to come up with sort of the priority areas that will impact a lot of people, and obviously hone in on areas for improvement. So now that that survey's closed, we're starting to turn our heads to engaging staff with disabilities. So right now we're starting to launch a staff engagement survey that will specifically look into what barriers people are facing within their workplaces, and at different times throughout their sort of work life cycle within the Toronto Public Service. I also want to actually jump back to just about the public survey. I'm happy to report that we surpassed our expected response rate. So in the end, we got over 1,400 responses from either people with disabilities, support persons, or organizations. So I specifically want to thank anybody on the committee who completed that survey, because you know, we're really happy that we got such a strong response rate. So after the employee consultations, I should mention too that we also have an employee disability network internally. So we'll also be working with them to get a little bit more information on the experiences that their members are experiencing as well at the Toronto Public Service. And then as we move along in consultations, I'll speak about this again in my next slide, but of course we plan on engaging TAC as well throughout the process. So we definitely recognize that you will provide valuable input, and we really want to hear what you have to say as well. So obviously, once we kind of finish all the consultations, collect that information, we hope to distill it down to start forming what will be the basis of those sort of the commitments, the new commitments that make it into the plan. So at that point, we will start collaborating with divisions to really hone in and tune those commitments that will help improve equity and accessibility across the city. Then we will be moving into really the approvals and endorsement process, and that will be through the winter. And then we hope to launch the new strategic plan at the start of 2025. And then the last stage really of the process is monitoring. So we have a kind of evaluate and monitor step, and this will obviously be really ongoing in nature. So with the new plan, we're really looking to see how we can gather input and feedback throughout the 5-year life cycle. So most likely we'll be looking to have some type of feedback form, a live feedback form that people can submit to provide feedback. And then that will also help us when we go to develop the next plan. We will already have a large amount of feedback to pull from. So this sort of summary slide really shows the sequence of consultations and approvals for the new plan. So it's taking us from consultation with the public, community organizations, staff, TAC, divisions, and then final approval by the city manager and through approval through council. The main thing, however, I really want to cover here is that we are planning to come to TAG several times this year. So in addition to today's presentation, we plan on coming back in June to present the findings from our public consultations. As well, we can outline sort of what our next steps are with the development of the plan. And then, as I mentioned, based on our timelines, we hope to have a draft sort of in the fall that would be ready for tax input. And then once we review the committee's feedback, we'll come back to hopefully seek your endorsement through a staff report that will move on through executive and then to council in January. So the last slide, I just want to mention that in addition to the input from our MIAP consultations, we're also reviewing several other inputs. So first and foremost, we always monitor TAC meetings. So that always helps us understand, you know, what issues and concerns are coming forward, and really, you know, it helps see recommendations for improvement as well. So definitely, you know, we're reviewing the meetings over the past few years just to see what kind of recommendations the committee has come forward with and concerns. We also, as Deirdre mentioned, we're reviewing inquiries that have come into our office. So we get over about 300 inquiries and complaints a year. So we've been able to summarize that information to really pick out the trends to see what concerns are coming to the forefront. We'll also be reviewing other city strategies to see where there's opportunity for alignment. So for example, the seniors strategy, there's probably some good opportunities for alignment and you know, work that can come out of those both strategies. We'll also be working, as I mentioned, with our employee disability network to understand a little bit more, unpack what the issues are impacting staff. And of course, we'll also keep an eye out for recommendations coming from the provincial standards development committees, because we know that various standards are currently under review and that new standards are planned. So we have to keep an eye out for what that will mean for the city and how we can work that into our plans. So with that, I will pass it back through the chair to open it up for questions and comments.
Thank you very much. We have two speakers on this item. I will ask the clerk to confirm that our first speaker, Chad Hamid, is ready to proceed. Okay, we're just gonna wait for Chad. So we will skip to Ingrid Boudet of No More Noise Toronto. Ingrid, I see you there. 5 minutes, please.
Great, thank you. I'm in a loud space. Can I please share my screen?
I'll just stop.
Thank you for stopping the time. I'm in a loud space, so I hope you can hear me okay? In the room? I am now the presenter. Okay, one moment. Share, and you should be able to see my screen now. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Chair Myers and the committee for the great work that you do for making City of Toronto an accessible city. I might be speaking a little bit out of the box here, so I thank you for this opportunity. I am Ingrid Boudet. I'm the founder of No More Noise Toronto, and we take a data-centered and equity approach to noise. It is the #2 urban environmental health hazard, and its health impacts have been researched for decades. There's both physical and mental health impacts, and noise impacts some people more than others, those living with vision loss, those who have cognitive or mental conditions or disorders, those who have suffered from brain injuries, highly sensitive individuals, and it's known that marginalized populations tend to live in louder places. Noise, the definition of noise is unwanted and or harmful sound. So we'll just start by level setting there. I need to activate my screen. There we go. So my work attracted the attention of Citizen Minutes and Hot Docs, and I really encourage you to have a look at this 8-minute documentary. It talks about why noise is a health hazard, why data collection is important, and how it impacts those with vision loss. It does feature Daniela Levy-Pinto, who wrote in a letter to this committee today regarding how noise impacts her health. So we are collaborating through deputations. We're collaborating with other city departments. We had a session with Gary York, the Executive Director of the Customer Experience Division, formerly 311, about noise. We have one coming up on June 4th with Municipal Licensing and Standards about the noise bylaws. And we're also working with Toronto Police Services regarding moving vehicle noise. We advocated to Toronto Public Health for reduction of noise pollution to be a part of their strategic priorities, and I really hope that this group joins us as well in our collaborative approach to making a better sounding city. For those who may not be, who may be watching this as a video, this is a little bit of a background on Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee. And so you are focused on removing barriers for people with disabilities for their daily life within the city. And you also talk about accessibility of public spaces. And then here is some information regarding your 2025 to 2029 multi-year accessibility plan. And here's why I think you should consider noise pollution. Sound is the very first sense we develop. Do you know what that is? Do you know when that is? That is actually in the womb. We hear our mother's breathing and heartbeat before we hear anything else. We have no defense against sound. We cannot close our ears and our bodies never stop listening. So noise muffles the cues that people with vision loss use to navigate. Sudden sounds can startle, cause fear, and cause a loss of balance. Loud vehicles intimidate others in our public spaces, and it's also attributed to causing illnesses later in life, which can lead to accessibility issues such as Alzheimer's and dementia. It also creates induced hopelessness, which is a very sad condition, and it is linked to apathy as well. So more has been done for reducing air pollution than noise pollution. And noise pollution will be number one if we don't do anything about it now. Toronto is getting more dense and more loud. And Toronto Public Health found that areas with the lowest income brackets are 11 times more likely than the highest to have 50% of residents exposed to 55 decibels at night. The World Health Organization recommendation is 45. So you need to consider not only the built infrastructure in our environment, but also the air and the public spaces that we share. We need to provide safe and accessible journeys for everyone. Noise is an equity and an accessibility issue. And I appreciate the last speaker who just went over where you are now. So we are in the listen phase, and they actually answered questions. I was wondering, how are you engaging with people? How are you listening to the public? And that you invited feedback by email. As I am not a member of this community directly, I didn't know that. But I also would like to extend that No More Noise Toronto has over 1,300 members, and we have an audience for you. And I'd love to be able to host an online meeting so that you can hear from our membership as well. So finally, my recommendations will be reducing noise will help make our built form more equitable and safer. And this benefits everyone, and it supports the city's accessibility and climate goals. Make reducing noise pollution a part of your strategic priorities, weave it in there somehow. And I'm glad you're listening to the public, and I really hope that you can collaborate with No More Noise Toronto. We do want to create a more accessible city by reducing noise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ingrid. Are there any questions for the deputant? Nope. Thank you. Seeing none, no questions. Next,
Thank you.
Thank you. We will circle back. Is Chad Hamad there, please? No? Okay. So Chad is not there. So now we will move to questions of staff. Anybody have any questions of staff on their presentation? Okay. Seeing none. Oh, Dana, did I see your hand go up?
First of all, I thought it was a great presentation, and thank you very much. It really put some perspective on our committee and on the things that we should be having on our agenda moving forward. I also would be interested to hear your comments on whether we should be including noise as part of our accessibility issues. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks, Dana. With the direct question about including noise, I think it's something that we would consider as a sensory related barrier. And, I don't know what it would look like. We're not at the stage where I would know how that would be, what it would be considered, but certainly in terms of we could, looking at our guidance that we provide around, provide to staff in terms of looking at what are the barriers and making sure that considerations for sensory related barriers are included. I think that's absolutely part of the guidance that we provide. But what it would look like, I don't have an answer to that at this point.
Thanks very much, Deirdre.
Thank you. No further questions from Dana. Any other questions, please? Anika, 5 minutes, please.
Yes, so thank you for the presentation. I understand we're kind of in the listening phase of the development for the new multi-year accessibility plan. Something I didn't see directly addressed here, but any integration of, say, pandemic response. I mean, we still have effects of COVID currently, and with climate change, we don't know what the future holds, but is that something that's been considered so far?
I would say if the last few years of our annual report, so our last multi-year accessibility plan really was launched at the start of the pandemic. So it influenced how that strategy has developed and been played out. And certainly the last 3 years of our annual reports, we have highlighted the impact of COVID on accessibility in Toronto. Karen may have more to speak to that. In terms of moving forward, I think that our experiences and what we've learned in the last few years will definitely impact the priorities and commitments, and there's definitely been lessons learned. I don't know, Karen was very involved in some of that work during the pandemic. Do you have anything to add, Karen?
I would just say that we saw some great work and outcomes coming out of how the city responded. I'm thinking particularly with holding, accessible vaccination clinics and making sure that emergency information is accessible and people are getting it. And so I think there's a lot of things we saw develop, and we would want for sure the city to continue if, another similar event happened, or, we just want to recognize them as also best practices overall for things that need to be considered at the start of different planning. So yeah, I think we'll see it continue in the next plan for sure. It may not speak directly to COVID and this pandemic, but the language might be more broad. But I think for sure, we know we've learned a lot, and we want to continue down the good lessons learned, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? No? Okay, thank you very much. Are there any speakers on this item? No? I'll have just some brief remarks. Just thank you very much for the presentation. I think the work is great. I think we're definitely on the right track. And I definitely thank you for making the time today to present to the committee on the multi-year accessibility plan. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
So seeing no further speakers, is there a motion to receive the item for information? Anika, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. So next we have item DI 6.5, accessible taxis and cars for hire services. This is a letter from members, Dana Francoise and Luke Anderson. Members, the purpose of this item today is for the committee to invite the Spinal Cord Injury Ontario group to do a presentation at our next meeting. There are 3 recommendations in this letter. Please hold on the discussion of these recommendations until the next meeting after we have heard their presentation. We will have the relevant city staff at our next meeting as well to answer any of your questions. Dana and Luke, would you like to provide an overview, please?
I thank you very much for considering this. I think it's really important, particularly to do with issues of accessibility, that we look at the availability or lack thereof of accessible vehicles and taxis for hire in a timely fashion. Luke, do you want to add more?
I can just add that there has been a tremendous decline in the available vehicles for hire that are accessible since the beginning of the pandemic. And there's a number of advocates who have had a really hard time having access to accessible vehicles for hire. So we're collaborating and been in communication with the Spinal Cord Injury Ontario, specifically Peter Athanasopoulos, who is leading the way with this issue on Spinal Cord Injury Ontario's part. So we'll look forward to Peter's presentation next meeting.
Thank you, Dana and Luke. Are there any questions on this item from any of the members? No? Okay. Are there any speakers on this item? No? Okay. Hearing no further speakers, can I please have a motion to adopt the recommendation? Eric, thank you very much. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. So we are on to our final item now, DI 6.6, training session on meeting process and governance. Members, today we have Carly Turpin, manager, boards, tribunals, and council advisory bodies to provide a training session on meeting process and governance. Carly, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. Thank you for having me. Just bear with me a moment so I can have the presentation on the screen. All right, assuming it looks like it's there for us. So as the chair mentioned, I am here to give a brief presentation on meeting processes, governance, with a specific focus though on types of motions and how to move motions. So again, my name is Carly Turpin. I am one of the managers within the city clerk's office responsible for supporting council advisory bodies. Just to review, I believe we've seen some of this information in a couple of orientations that have been given over the years. So some seasoned members, this is probably a bit of a repeat, but just wanted to put this in here as a reminder. The advisory committee may make recommendations to city officials on matters within their jurisdiction. You may make recommendations to a council committee. So that could be executive committee, it could be planning and housing, any of the standing committees of council. You can also make recommendations to City Council on a matter on the council agenda. A recommendation that requires action by city officials or City Council must first be considered by the appropriate council committee and, when necessary, approved by City Council. These recommendations can come forward from city staff outlined in staff reports, or they can be from members of the advisory committee by moving motions. So there are a couple of different motion types, which I will briefly explain here, but then we do have slides and examples of each one further into the presentation. So the most common motion you see at advisory committees is the motion to receive the item for information. Another fairly common motion type is the motion that is to adopt the recommendations that are before you. Those would likely be in a staff report that you would have had in advance, and the recommendation would be from city officials in there. You can also move a motion to amend a recommendation, and that would be if you want to change some part of the recommendation, or if you want to support the recommendation but add some additional information to it. Another option as well for motion type is to defer an item, and that would be you started a presentation on an item, or there's a presentation on the agenda, but perhaps we've run out of time, or perhaps that we don't have all the members there and we'd like everybody there to hear it. You could move a motion to defer consideration of the item to a future date of your meeting. Now, the refer motion type is probably not one you will see much at an advisory body level, but we did include it here just because it is a motion type that could be seen, and that is to basically send an item back to city staff for further consultation, or it can be sent back to a different decision body so that you would see at council. Council may have a report that comes to them from one of the standing committees. They decide they need some more information, so they can send it back to the standing committee for further work before it comes to them. So a good motion, and there's a few characteristics of a good motion. They should state what action is to be taken, make clear who is responsible for taking that action, state the timeline the action should be taken in if possible, leave no room for interpretation, be able to stand alone. And what we mean by that is there is multiple recommendations on an item. Each recommendation needs to be able to go forward on its own. So it can't rely on another recommendation in the report. So recommendation 1 cannot rely on something else in recommendation 2 or 3 to make happen. Obviously, the actions have to be within the committee's mandate and jurisdiction. They must be written in the active voice. We use plain language wherever possible so that it can be easily understood by any member of the public who may be reading it, and avoid using acronyms, again, to ensure that members of the public are understanding of what we are writing. Now, the role of the clerk here, we are the ones that can help you format your motions so that they meet all of these criteria. So we're going to go through a couple of examples, and we've left time at the end for questions. So if you have anything that comes to mind, please just jot it down or type it into your computer, and I'll leave some space for questions at the end. So as previously mentioned, the motion to the receive item is, I think, all of the motions we've passed today have all been to receive an item for information. So again, this is most common when you're receiving presentations from city officials on information, on city programs, or things that you may have requested that city staff come to present to you on. So not necessarily any active action to be taken, but just to receive the information that has been presented to you. Motion to adopt item. So committee decision here was from a previous decision of the Accessibility Advisory Committee. You can see it on the screen there that the advisory committee was recommending that the general manager of transportation services, in consultation with the city solicitor, present to the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee in the first quarter of 2022 with a review of Supreme Court decision and any new service enhancements to ensure safer winter sidewalk and road access for pedestrians after a snowfall. So these are common in staff reports or letters where recommendations are already in front of you. Another option is the motion to defer item. Again, this is a decision that came from one of the other previous meetings of the Accessibility Committee, where the committee deferred consideration of the item to the next meeting of the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee on June 13th, 2022. So just something to point out, when moving motions to defer, we do want to have a meeting date in there. So we do make sure that when we are passing a motion to defer something, we've included the meeting date. It doesn't have to be the next meeting date. You could pick a different meeting date as well, but we do always ensure that the meeting date is in there. And if you aren't sure what the next meeting date is, that's what the clerk's team is here for. We can certainly help you fill that in. So a motion to amend an item or an amend item additional is to change the recommendations that are before you from city officials. Again, you may be supportive of the recommendation, but you want to add something to it, or you are supportive of the recommendation with a slight tweak to it. So these would be drafted with assistance from city officials, typically the report author where possible, and again with clerks to assist as well. So a couple of recommendations, samples on the screen for you of motions that were moved at other advisory bodies. This one was to add some additional information and request a few changes to what was in front of the film board for decision. So this would have been done in consultation with film board staff that were in the room, and then again with clerks as well. This one is another sample to amend an item. Just to demonstrate here, this was one that was providing some clear direction to city officials, which the advisory body then needs to send up to the relevant standing committee for that endorsement. So you'll see that the recommendation actually ended up at Infrastructure and Environment Committee to request that the General Manager of Transportation Services do a number of things that were requested as part of an Accessibility Advisory Committee recommendation. This example is where they've added in some additional requirements. So there was some recommendations brought forward by staff that was in front of the film board for a decision, and members of the film board felt like some pieces were missing and they would like to see some additional things added. So they moved a motion to add portion A to this item. Another example, this one actually is from one of our local boards, and they had some recommendations in front of them that the board didn't feel wasn't entirely fulsome, so they moved two motions to add two additional recommendations. So again, they would have done this in consultation with board staff that were there to support the meeting and with the clerk's office. This example is one that's amending an item to request a report back. So this came directly from the Accessibility Advisory Committee, recommending that the Deputy City Clerk of Election Services report back to the June 13th, the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee, on how those who relied on at-home voting will be accommodated in the upcoming municipal election. So this would have come about, the Deputy City Clerk of Elections would have been at the Accessibility Advisory Committee making a presentation on the election, and members felt that they would like some further information, so they passed a motion to amend the item requesting that the Deputy City Clerk return at a later date with this requested information. So again, when requesting a report back, we do request that we put a date in there for that report back. Something to keep in mind when requesting a report back, though, is to have a realistic date. So it is good to be consultative with the staff responsible for authoring the report to make sure that the timeline you're looking for as a committee is reasonable for them to achieve. So a few things to note, I think I've mentioned them already, but just to re-emphasize, we do need your motion submitted in writing as soon as it's drafted. You may come up with the motions once the agenda is posted and you've reviewed the material, so you may have a motion in mind before even coming into the meeting. So if you could submit that to the clerk's office as soon as you've started to articulate it and write it down, we'd be happy to work with you and fine tune it so that it's ready for display at the meeting. As I've mentioned, we typically recommend that motions be shared with program staff so that they can ensure it's technically correct, and then clerks will review it from a procedural perspective as well. We do realize that sometimes motions do come up on the floor as you're listening to debate or you're listening to questions or presentations. So if that is the case, please come and see one of the clerk's staff in the meeting room. Let them know you'd like to move a motion and start drafting it as quickly as possible. If you do want to move a motion, you can certainly request the chair to hold an item down so that you can get your motion worked out, so that we don't miss it. But certainly, the more notice you can provide the clerk and you can provide the chair that you would like to move a motion, we can be aware of it and work with you and make sure we have the appropriate program staff available to answer questions to make sure the technical parts of the motion are correct as well. Something else we did want to flag is that you don't always have to move a motion to amend, and we don't have to formally track everything. A lot of the advisory role is to provide feedback to city staff who are here to consult on a various number of programs. So even if we don't move a specific motion, the staff are certainly here taking all of the feedback that is being provided during the discussion and question and answer period of the committee. Another thing we would like to point you to, and we can certainly, if anyone would like some tutorials on how to use this, we can arrange that with the clerk staff as well. But the public site where all the agendas and minutes are posted is a good information gathering resource. If you want to look for samples and examples of previous motions or how things are worded, you can certainly look up some examples there. You can do keyword searches. You can search specifically by the Accessibility Advisory Committee. So we highly recommend just poking around and checking those sites out as well. So intended to keep it short because I thought we would leave some time for questions, so happy to answer any questions that the members may have. Also can note if there are specific questions or if you would like a bit of one-on-one time, we can certainly set that up with any of our clerk staff and can workshop some motions and answer questions that way too, if that's helpful.
Thank you. Are there any questions of staff on this item? No. I just had one question to clarify. When does a motion need a seconder versus just an individual can just move a motion themselves?
So all of the motions moved to the council advisory bodies don't need to be seconded.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none. Any speakers on this item? No? Okay. I will just say thank you very much for your presentation. I thought this was really helpful and something I think that should be incorporated into future TAC intakes when there's a new board members, because I think this is a very helpful presentation that should be probably had at the beginning of the session. So yes, thank you. I saw Navi with her hand up.
All right, it was a thank you wave.
Oh. Okay. Any other speakers? Nope. Hearing no speakers, is there a motion to receive the item for information? Howard, thank you very much. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. So before we end the meeting, I will move a motion to excuse the absence of TAC members who are not able to attend today's meeting. I'll ask the clerk to display the motion and we'll read it aloud. That the Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee excuse the absence of Liv Mendelson from the May 6, 2024 Toronto Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Members, before we end today, I would like to discuss hybrid meetings. As we've been holding remote meetings for a while, we would just like to know if committee members would like to change to hybrid meetings. This means that you have the choice to attend the meeting in person at City Hall or attend the meeting by video conference. Does anyone have any thoughts one way or the other? No? Would anybody like to attend? Oh, Kate.
I just had a thought. I guess I might consider in person if I happen to be downtown, but I would probably need some pretty clear instructions on like where to go, how to get there, and then what sort of accessibility accommodations are available in person versus online where I have the captions all the time. So that's just my thoughts.
Thank you. Any other feedback or questions or thoughts? Eric.
Just curious if there are any, basically any reasons not to, as long as the accommodations are still available for those on the virtual setting, is there any downside to opening up to hybrid?
I'll leave that to staff. Any downsides? Like, will they have the same accessibility tools?
Eric, so you have a choice of attend in person or online. If you attend in person, the meeting will be conducted in a meeting room. The captioning you can see from the two screens in the meeting room. Yeah, but for now, I think we need to know what kind of accommodation you need before we used to have personal care worker. If people are in wheelchair, but it's been not used for a few years, but if necessary, we can arrange that too. So if you have individual accommodation needs, please let me know, then I will let you know whether you want to attend in person or remotely. Thanks.
Eric?
Sorry. Yeah, can I just clarify that that question is more, I guess, if we were opening up to hybrid, then those on virtual that choose to say virtual wouldn't have a lesser experience than they have today. So we would just be adding the experience of in-person for those that choose.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, then I'd say I'm supportive of the idea. Yeah.
Thank you. Miranda, did I see your hand up?
Yes, thank you. For me, personally, for my schedule, it's better for me to be able to attend virtually, but it's great to have that option for those who are able to attend in person. So I think the hybrid model would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Miranda. Any other feedback on going hybrid? Richard.
How would people submit motions? Like, do you bring your own laptop or how does that work?
It is good to have to bring your own laptop. It will make your meeting experience much better.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, so I didn't hear anyone vehemently opposed to hybrid meetings, so I guess it's okay to go ahead, so long as we continue, so long as everyone still has the option to attend virtually. Okay, great. Okay, do we need a formal motion to adopt? Okay, so we don't need a formal motion, which is a good thing because we just had our workshop. So this concludes our business. Thank you, members and staff. Our meeting is now adjourned. Our next meeting is on June 24th, 2024. Which will be a hybrid meeting. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Stay safe.